Next, 2007. This is a very disappointing movie because it has such a strong, powerful central idea based on a story by Philip K. Dick. The reason why I rewatched this for perhaps the third time is because I watched Madame Web 2024, which is not half as bad as its terrible reputation suggests. Now, I am not going to defend Madame Web as a great movie, but it was perfectly watchable. And at the climax, she was seeing premonitions a few seconds in advance so she could avoid getting hurt from exploding things happening in the warehouse where the final fight was taking place. And it reminded me of Next, because that's basically the central concept of this. Nicolas Cage can see a few seconds into the future and uses that during action scenes so he does not get hit. I misremembered it slightly. It turns out he can see 2 minutes into the future, but for all intents and purposes, that's what happens in the climax anyway. He can use that knowledge and avoid being killed because he can see a wee bit into the future. It's a great central concept, but they do pretty much nothing with it. It's so underused, and the movie, I looked down at the counter on my Blu-ray player and it said 55 minutes, and I thought to myself, you know what, this is basically the story just really kicking into gear. The real proper story, the real meat of the story is starting. This is basically the start of Act 2. It's all being set up leading up to decisions and stuff having to be made by the characters, and now Act 2 kicks in. So this movie basically has a 55-minute Act 1 and I don't know what, 20-minute Act 2 and then a 20-minute Act 3. So it's badly structured, just far too much setup. This sequence at the 55-minute point really should have been maybe more like 20 or 30 minutes into the movie. So it just takes too long to really kick into gear. And once it does eventually kick into gear, it's all very underwhelming. It never becomes anything of note. It's always stuck in first gear, never cranks up and actually becomes effective or powerful, and the whole thing just remains very indifferent. The movie has a decent budget. You can see there is money on the screen, but the story is small. The scope ultimately is not that big, and there is some very bad CGI, very cartoony looking, and that's unfortunate. The bad guys are very anonymous. They are just irrelevant pretty much. You barely recall who they are after they walk off screen. They just fade away, who cares? And literally, as the main bad guy was being killed, I thought to myself, oh wait, is he the main number one bad guy? Like, I didn't even recognise him as being the big bad of the movie. I just thought he was another henchman. I did, I suppose, assume there was going to be some sort of reveal in which there was a main, proper, full-on number one bad guy who would be revealed later in the movie, but that never happens. So the bad guys are just very anonymous. And I almost feel sorry for the bad guys in that Nicolas Cage is just so powerful that Nicolas Cage just rides roughshod over the bad guys who really have very little chance of being victorious, because Cage just can see everything in advance and therefore is close to unbeatable. and he just, especially at the Act 3 action climax, he just walks through it all. There's zero tension, there's no risk of him being hurt or even being much in the way of inconvenienced for more than a few seconds, because he just is so much more powerful than the bad guys. So if you have these very underpowered bad guys, the dramatic tension of the movie is essentially zero. It was all very watchable. It just is nothing of note. It is an utterly indifferent, rather drab movie. Jessica Alba, no, sorry, Jessica Biel, that's how interchangeable some of the actors are. Jessica Biel gives a notably poor performance. She is a bit blank sometimes. There's a particular moment when Julianne Moore, and she doesn't really give a particularly good performance either. There's a particular sequence when Julianne Moore stops Jessica Biel outside her car and says, "Could you come with me? I'm FBI. I would like to talk to you about the Nicolas Cage character." And there's like a close-up on Jessica Biel. There's this pause. I think she kind of looks off over here for a moment. Pause, pause. Turns back. And then like nods her head and goes, "Okay." And you realise, oh, she was supposed to be thinking during that moment. But you can just, it was just such a blank moment. She, as an actress, was just like looking off screen for a moment, just looking into the distance. There was no thinking behind it. It was just very blank, notably blank. So I don't think she was a very good actress in this movie. Not that anyone else was giving their best. This was not a movie where people gave their A+ material. I would give next a mildly generous 5 out of 10. It's perfectly watchable. I have seen it, as I say, maybe 3 times. If this was my 4th viewing, I would not be that surprised, although I do doubt that. It's innocuous, competently made, mildly entertaining, sci-fi tinged sort of action, sort of thriller. Perfectly solid, but certainly of no distinction. The movie is quite short at only 90 minutes. Unfortunately, it ends a scene too early because Cage goes. It turns out that Acts 2 and 3 were all a premonition that Nicolas Cage had, and so now he has all this knowledge that he did not have beforehand, and so he can just go to the FBI and defeat the bad guys very, very easily, super quick. And I would like to see Nicolas Cage do that. I want to see Nicolas Cage defeat the bad guys super quick. It would be maybe as much as 2 minutes of screen time if you just want to do it as him telling Julianne Moore all that he knows. Or it could be another 10 minutes with some actual action scenes as we see the FBI take the bad guys down and uncover the nuclear bomb, which Nicolas Cage now knows where it is. It's quite anticlimactic the way the movie just fades out to black so abruptly. The movie is not arty-farty enough to really get away with this arty-farty, oblique ending where the film ends early before the story has actually really wrapped up. I, as a viewer, want to see the bad guys get defeated super quick because Nicolas Cage now has all this knowledge.